Back in March, I had the opportunity to go out to San Diego and speak in front of a whole bunch of entrepreneurs. Now, when I got there, I had it in my head that I was going to speak about conscious leadership and how you create your life. But the first two speakers on stage spoke exactly what I was going to speak about. So as I was sitting there kind of freaking out, figuring out what I was going to speak about, I just decided to listen to my heart. And as I stepped out on stage, I was like, I'm going to wing it. But what my heart called me to do was to share two of the most defining moments in my life, which happened to be two of the most painful moments of my life while I was in the middle of 16 years of porn addiction. Now, this is the first time I ever shared my story publicly on stage in this way, so I'm really excited for you guys to check out this video. Let's go. Welcome, brave explorers, traveling heroes, and powerful creators to this infinitely expansive present moment co-created by you and me to explore the transformative power of experiential truths, consciousness, and oneness. So I was going to come up here and I was going to talk about how I transform businesses, business owners, how you're the creator of your life, conscious leadership. But there was a lot of that on the first day. And there was some really incredible speakers that said it so eloquently that I figured that in the spirit of TAG, that I would share some defining experiences in my life and how they've shaped who I am today. So when I was 30 years old, I'm 36 now, I was leaving the gym with my wife. And she grabbed my hand and she said, "Babe, we need to talk." Now, if anybody knows those four letters or those four words and what that means inside of a relationship, typically, it's not good. But that phrase stimulated so much anxiety for me. Not just because of that moment, but because I had been hiding something. See, I'd been hiding a porn addiction that I had been suffering from for 16 years of my life. And if you know anything about human beings, you think you can hide something, but really human beings are the most transparent beings on the planet. She knew, she just didn't know the story. So the story is when I was 14 years old, I was a horny 14-year-old kid. And also we were moving from AOL dial-up internet into broadband internet. This is 2000, right? So broadband internet, high-speed internet. Let me just bring in all these videos, right? And again, I'm curious. And I'm also fortunate enough to be in a family at the time that had a computer. And I had a basement. And I was alone. So I started to dive in and explore my sexuality, my curiosity, and found plenty of things to satisfy that. Now, I don't blame my parents for this. When I really think about generations, like my parents had no idea what was going to happen in the technology boom. They raised me on their values. They raised me on what they knew, but they had no idea what this was going to be. And they did their best. They put the safe search blocker on and all the different things, right? But I was a smart kid, probably too smart for my own good, and I figured it out. Well, fast forward to being 20, and I was starting to experience anxiety, social anxiety. If I was on stage like this, you would see my hand shaking. I would never even be up here. But also performance anxiety. I'm a 20-year-old boy, man, I guess at this point, and I'm having interactions with women in which I cannot do what a man, or what I think a man should do. It was devastating. And the more I failed, the more my anxiety compounded, the more I created beliefs and thoughts in my head about how I'm not good enough, what's wrong with me, why am I different from other men, why am I cursed with this thing that I don't even know how it happened. By the time I was 24, I was taking, Viagra, Cialis, all the things to try and help me, but I was still having these stories in my head about how I'm different. And then I got to a point where I kind of cursed God, right? Why me? Why me? And this is the first time I got introduced to a different voice inside of me. I'd never heard it before. It seemingly spoke from my heart and it said, "Hey dude, the porn's the problem." Now I chose to ignore that for the next couple of years as well and continued to do what I was doing. And over time, my suffering experience became more intense and more intense until I met my wife. I was about 26. And when I met my wife, you ever meet somebody and you meet them, it's like fireworks. Like, you. And for the first year, I barely watched porn compared to what I was doing. We're talking multiple times a day. But to that point, I probably could have watched it tens of thousands of times. Right? This is years of this at this point. But after the year, the honeymoon phase is gone. And I start falling back into the old habits. I start falling back into porn. And I'll tell you, out of all the things that are really terrible about porn addiction, and addiction in general, is that you cannot experience love in the way that it's meant to be experienced. I was searching for love with my partners, with people, with porn, with everything else, and no matter what I did, the hole inside of my heart would not fill. So then I started to dive into other things that would give me a temporary high, like drugs. And my wife also participated in this. So for the next 2 years, I got addicted to really hard drugs, MDMA, cocaine, the whole thing. I like to say that I turned myself into a bipolar individual by partying on the weekends and then crying on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, just to go back into the weekend, get another high. And I was so lost with who I was. So about a month after we got married, my wife looked at me, my face, and said, I don't love you anymore. I don't know who you are. And that hurt. Because what did I want? Love. What did I want to experience? Love. I didn't have it. So leading up to this moment of walking out of the gym, my wife grabbing my hand and saying that we need to talk, we walk to my truck and we get in. She says, let me see your phone. I reluctantly gave it to her. And she pulls out the in private browsing on my phone, which I don't know if things have changed, but back then, Google would still save the searches that you would search over and over again. And if you know anything about an addict likes to go to one thing and do that one thing over and over again, and I had my scenes and I had my genres. She pulls out the phone and she shows me the things that I would never want her to see, that I would never want anybody to see about me. And she said, babe, what's this? That's not me. That's not me. It wasn't me. She said, babe, this is your phone. Who else could it be? I said, somebody cracked my phone. It was somebody else. It wasn't me. Now, while this is happening, there's another voice inside of me that's saying, tell her the truth. Tell her the truth. She asked the third time, but the third time she said, look, if you don't tell me the truth right now, I'm going to leave you. I said, it wasn't me. Now I'm crying at this point. Third time denial. And as I'm saying it wasn't me, another voice speaks out and says, but I did watch that. Think about that duality. It's not me, but I did do this thing. I got to the point where I admitted it. So she gets out of my truck, and then I started driving my truck back to our place, and it was the first time I seriously thought about committing suicide. But then a question popped up in my mind. Who's listening? Who is the thing that's listening to these voices that's inside of me? Who is that? About 4 months later, my wife's sticking around. She comes in the place and she says, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Now, mind you, at this point, I had actually started what I considered the beginning of my healing process. I went to an anxiety therapist. I went to a sex therapist. I just got done with a 90-day fast of everything, which, if anybody knows anything about being an addict, especially a porn addict, that is exceptionally difficult to do. But I was so afraid I was going to lose her. I wanted to change. I truly wanted to change. So I was telling her I'm doing all these things. I'm like, I'm working on it. Please don't go. Please don't go. Now, there's communication styles, and psychology would tell you that I was an anxious attachment. That means that when I want to talk about something, I want to talk about something now, and until I talk about it, I'm not okay. Well, she's anxious avoidant, which means I don't want to talk about it, leave me alone. So I kept pushing to the point where she had locked herself in the closet. And I'm leaning up against the other side of the closet door, crying, just saying, please, don't go, don't go. And then suddenly she swings open the door and she says, I want to die. And she starts to run for the kitchen. I assume that she wants to grab a knife. So I get inside and I get into the doorway and I'm blocking her. I'm like, please, please, I'll go. Don't do this. I'll go. And during that moment, it was like my entire life flashed in front of my eyes. Every choice that I had ever made that led up to that point was right in front of me. And I had another question. who's watching? If I'm watching myself as this character, who's the one that's watching? So about 4 months later, my wife left. We got divorced, and we got divorced on Valentine's Day. That was interesting. I'm sitting in meditation, and I had picked up meditation about 4 months before. And as I'm in meditation, this voice spoke to me and said, what would happen if you took 100% responsibility for your choices and your life experiences right now? And something shifted inside of me. I had this new lens to look through, and it was a lens of responsibility. And anybody that has not been taking responsibility for their life, but then chooses to take responsibility, will feel the heaviness of that inside of you. You look at all the ways that you have victimized yourself to your circumstances, your excuses, all the ways that you had blamed other people. At the time, I was blaming her for leaving me. How could she give up on me? How could she leave me in my time in which I needed it the most? Now, this desire for responsibility also motivated me to want to learn what happened to me. What happened to me during addiction? So that drove me to start learning about all sorts of different modalities, neuroplasticity, epigenetics, neurochemistry, subconscious remapping. I dove through the whole thing. And even with that, there was still something missing. There was a substantial reality that was underneath all these non-substantial theories, some proven to be fact, that hole inside of my heart was still missing. And that's what drove me into consciousness, spirituality, higher power, God, whatever you want to call it. And through all the work that I did over years, I actually finally answered those two questions. Who's listening and who's watching? There's been a lot of talk about mindset and how to build a strong mindset. And your mindset has to be wired for success. Well, I'm here to tell you the way to build a strong mindset is to realize that you're not your mind. That you are the observer of your thoughts, your emotions, and your habits. And during this time that I was, on this quest to find something, I was always looking for truth. Well, truth likes to trigger people. The truth that triggers people is relative truth. Things that you might believe to be true that somebody else would discredit. But I was looking for absolute truth, and what I realized absolute truth is experiential truth. And an experiential truth that I learned is that 1, I can observe, and so can you. 2, I can choose, and so can you. So if you were to think about acceptance and the power of acceptance, if I accept that I am fear, that I am shame, that I am guilt, but I'm also courage, I'm joy, I'm love, I'm peace. If I accept the shadow side of me and the light side of me and realize that I'm neither, I'm in my most powerful stance. Because I can sit back and I can observe all the experiences that I could possibly have, and I can choose which one I would like to have. So another defining experience actually happened last night. As you guys were probably hanging out, I went on a walk, and I started to think about what it is I want to do with my life. Because currently I work with business owners, I work with businesses. It's fulfilling, it absolutely is. I can take these same principles that I'm talking about right now, and I can apply it to anything, and it works. But then suddenly I started to cry. I started to cry because I started to think about all the brothers, and even sisters, the millions of them that are experiencing the suffering of pornography addiction. And how I have been selfish because I have a story in my head. I don't want to be the porn guy. I don't want to be the guy that's known for the porn that I watched and the people that I help. How selfish of me. Then I realized something else, that I am experiencing this hole inside of me right now. What is that? Well, I'm holding on to something that I know, this gift, that I know I can be given to so many. But I don't really have it. Because the only way to have something is to give it away. And I have not been giving it away. So the last experiential truth I want to share with you guys, and this is something that Raul talked about. He said, it was like I was living in a fog. But then people were telling me, hey, I'm you. I've had the same type of experiences. Suffering is an experiential truth. And when we open up our hearts and we start being transparent and vulnerable about the experiences that we have, we find another experiential truth, which is that what is most personal is most universal. That we are connected through our suffering, but we're also connected through love. And when we're willing to open up our hearts and share our truths of what we've experienced in our lives, we help somebody else heal. Thank you all. If something deep inside of you resonated with today's topic, drop a question or comment below. It would be my honor to chat with you. Remember to share this video with just one person you desire to set free, because all it takes is one video, one message, one experience to awaken our collective birthright of freedom and the self-realization that we are all one.